the story that I've been most interested in telling from the nexus of the Detroit mob and the Detroit sports scene is regarding the Bad Boys, the Pistons championship teams of the late '80s, early '90s. My all-time favorite teams. I swear by those Bad Boy squads. I loved every player on those teams. I watched every game. I went to a lot of those games. I lived in. I mean, that was really the '84 Tigers. I was a little kid and I was into it, but I was 5 years old. You can only appreciate sports so much as a 5-year-old. But my love of sports really came about from the Bad Boys. And sometimes, you can it can be sobering to learn about your heroes. So some of this was, or I wouldn't say some of this, all of this is public knowledge. It was written about in the late '90s in a book by Armand Katayan called Moneyball. Everyone knows about the Moneyball book that was turned into the film with Brad Pitt,
Lewis,
about Michael Lewis, about Billy Bean and metrics and crunching numbers to win baseball games. But the first Moneyball was actually written in, I believe it came out in 1997, and it was about NBA players and their crazy off the court lives and adventures. And in that book, it came out that there were allegations of point shaving against the Bad Boys, and there were very specific allegations. There were 3 games in the 1988-89 season. So it was the season they won their first championship. And they both happened, all 3 incidents happened in the first 2 or 3 months of the season. Isiah Thomas, the captain of the team, was implicated, as well as James Edwards. They were investigated, never charged. Isiah, though, was called in front of a federal grand jury to account for hundreds of thousands of dollars that he was cashing through a mobbed up grocery store owner who he lived next to, who he was very close friends with, a Chaldean by the name of Emmett Denha. Emmett still owns Shoppers Market, which is kind of like an Aldi, wholesale, lower income neighborhoods. And Isiah was cashing hundreds of thousands of dollars a month through these grocery stores. The FBI thought they were gambling proceeds. He claims that they were money. He didn't want to go to a bank because of autograph seekers and whatnot, and that the money that he was cashing was allowance for his wife and children. We know for sure that the Detroit mob was holding casino nights at Isiah's house. That's undisputed. And they were also holding these casino nights at Tommy Hearns' house. This was before, the MGM and Greektown and Motor City Casino. But there were still a lot of high rollers that wanted to play dice, that wanted to play blackjack. They had nowhere else to do it. And the Detroit mob would host these floating casino nights. Sometimes they'd be in warehouses. Sometimes they'd be in, small bungalows somewhere hidden in Northwest Detroit. But for the when they were bringing out the heavy artillery, when they got the highest of high rollers, they would sometimes host these events at celebrities' mansions. And Isiah and Tommy Hearns were 2 people that allowed them to have these events at their house. And they both admitted under oath that they participated in these events, that they were gamblers. They wanted to throw dice, but they denied any wrongdoing in terms of illegal activity with the mob, other than, I think, admitting they gambled.
Well, isn't
hosting? I guess inviting Jackie Giacalone and Billy Giacalone and Alan Hill into your house for them to host, craps games and blackjack games.
Yeah, I mean, other than the 6 felonies, nothing illegal took place.
So
unbelievable.
Alan Hill, the same person that Don DiSerrano was booking these Mickelson bets through, he sat courtside at all the Piston games. And he had again, I'm digressing a little bit. He had an over-under scam going where he had the timekeeper on his payroll. So he had a like a coded system with hand gestures to the timekeeper about when to start the clock. And I heard Hilf was making hundreds of thousands of dollars on over-unders that he'd be able to manipulate with the timekeeper. But Hilf was also allegedly headlining these point-shaving scams with the Bad Boys. Again, Isiah and Edwards were never charged. The FBI came out after the news broke, and the news actually broke on the day that the Pistons won their second championship. And when they got off the plane from Portland in 1990, some of the air was kind of taken out of their balloon as winning back-to-back champions, because Isiah had to answer these questions about being called in front of grand juries investigating the Mafia. In fact, I believe Sports Illustrated kicked the Pistons off the cover that week and instead put Hale Irwin on the cover, another golfer, instead of the Pistons being back-to-back. And the headline or the article in Sports Illustrated that week about the Pistons winning back-to-back was thorns in roses, being like Pistons win back-to-back, but also have to deal with allegations that their team captain, and who had just won MVP of the finals, was called in front of a federal grand jury investigating a mob gambling ring. The allegations are very specific. There are 3 games. One game Isiah didn't even play in. He pulled himself out of the game pulled himself out of the lineup a minute before tip-off, so the line couldn't change. So one of the games he didn't actually play in, but they're saying that by him removing himself and saying that I'm not going to play today affected the line because the line couldn't.
He's the best player on the floor.
Right. Yeah. One of the games, it looks bad for Isiah in terms of his performance. Now, he could have just had a bad game, but he missed a bunch of free throws at the end of the game. He had a horrible shooting percentage. They went from like, I can't remember the exact line, but they went from up and covering to not covering pretty quickly. And it had to be his worst game of the year. If you looked at his stat.
Credibly suspicious, at least.
Yeah.
I mean, credibly suspicious.
And Alan Hilf would often tell anyone, including some conversations that I had with him, that he did not like Isiah Thomas. He had a lot of issues with Isiah Thomas. A lot of those issues stem from these allegations.
Thank you for watching Spiro Avenue. Don't forget to hit like.
It's like you're reading a script.
I am reading a script.
No, you're not. Do I have a script out?
You gave me a script.
Oh my god. Okay. Just do it. Just do it.
Am I doing the friendly one again?